She knew she might die that night, not because something went wrong, because this is what childbirth did to women like her. No midwife, no doctor, no one who knew what to do if something went wrong. Just a teenage girl in labor, on a stone floor, in a place animals sleep. And once it started, there was no stopping it. No help coming, no second chances. Because in her world, a first birth like this, alone, was how women died. And Mary knew that. So the real question is not how Jesus was born. It's this. In first century Jewish culture, birth was not a medical event. It was a communal one. Midwives are mentioned throughout Scripture and Jewish tradition. The Talmud records their role extensively. Exodus 1 names Shipra and Puah, two midwives whose work is detailed enough that we know exactly what they did. They attended laboring women. They managed the delivery. They tied and cut the cord. They washed the baby. They wrapped the baby. They monitored the mother afterward for hemorrhage and fever. This was specialist knowledge. It took years to acquire. Women who had assisted at dozens or hundreds of births knew things that no amount of good intentions could substitute for. How to position a baby that was turned wrong, when to act and when to wait, what a dangerous labor looked like from a safe one. A birth without a midwife was a sign of poverty or emergency. It happened. The rabbis recorded it as a category of hardship. It was not celebrated. It was survived when it was survived. Mary had no midwife, not because she couldn't afford one, because she was 90 miles from home, in a city where she had no connections, in a room that was offered at the last minute by someone who felt sorry for a pregnant woman with nowhere else to go. She was going to do this with whatever knowledge she had and whatever Joseph could provide. And she was 15, maybe 16, in her first birth. Joseph was there. That is almost certain. Luke 2:7 says she laid the child in a manger. But Joseph's presence throughout the narrative is implied by his role in traveling, registering, and finding shelter. But Joseph was a builder, a tekton, a man who worked with stone and wood. He knew tools and materials and the physics of construction. He did not know the biology of labor. In first century Jewish culture, birth was entirely in the domain of women. Men were typically not present at deliveries. The birthing space was managed by the attending women, the midwife, the mother's mother, experienced neighbors. A man in a delivery room was not helpful. He was in the way. Joseph was in the way, not because he didn't want to help, because there was no category in his experience for what was happening. He could do what he could do, prepare the space, get water, keep the animals calm, be present. He could not do what the midwife would have done. He did not know how. So Mary labored largely alone, with Joseph nearby but helpless in the specific ways that mattered. Without the experienced hands and practiced knowledge that every other Jewish woman of her generation would have had around her in this moment. She had her body, her knowledge, and whatever God was doing in the room that Luke does not record. A first labor in a young woman is rarely short. Modern obstetrics tracks first labors in hours, often 12 to 24 hours from the first regular contraction to delivery. In the ancient world, without the interventions that shorten labor today, the timeline was longer. The Talmud records cases of labor lasting 2 and 3 days. Long labors were not unusual. They were feared because they were exhausting, and exhausted mothers in difficult deliveries were more likely to die. Mary labored through the night. Probably. We don't know what time the contractions began, only that the birth happened while they were in Bethlehem. The shepherds were in the fields at night when the angel appeared, which places the birth at night or close to it. She labored on a stone floor covered with hay. She had no bed, no clean linens prepared in advance in a familiar room, no water heated ahead of time. She had the lower room of a borrowed house, animals nearby, and the swaddling cloths she had packed and carried from Nazareth because she knew she would need them. The swaddling cloths, that detail. She had packed them for a 90-mile journey, 9 months pregnant, knowing she was going to deliver somewhere and planning for it. She didn't know she would deliver in a stable, but she packed for delivery because that was the practical thing to do. And she was a practical woman. Even in conditions she hadn't anticipated, she had prepared what she could prepare. And then the child was born. Luke 2:7. She gave birth to her firstborn son. One sentence. The most understated sentence in the history of understatement. The birth of the person around whom all of human history would reorient. Recorded in 8 words in the original Greek. She caught him, or Joseph caught him. Someone did. A newborn delivered without a midwife doesn't land safely on a stone floor. Someone's hands were ready. The cord had to be tied and cut. With what? Thread from her clothes, most likely. Something clean enough. Something strong enough. She knew this had to be done. Every woman who had ever seen a birth knew this. She had seen births. She had been in the room when neighbors delivered. She knew the sequence even if she had never done it herself. She cleaned him with whatever water they had and whatever cloth they had. The vernix, the white coating that covers a newborn at birth. The blood. She cleaned it as best she could in a borrowed room in the dark. Then the swaddling. Linen strips 4 fingers wide, wound around the limbs, holding them straight and warm. She wound them around his arms, his legs, his small body. The motion she had prepared for and never practiced on a baby before. He cried. And for the first time in all of human history, the sound of that specific cry was in the world. This section is not meant to frighten. It is meant to make you feel the weight of what didn't happen. A baby can present incorrectly. Breech, transverse, face presenting. Without a midwife who knew how to reposition, these presentations were frequently fatal for the baby, and often for the mother. Hemorrhage after delivery was the leading cause of maternal death in the ancient world. Without experienced hands monitoring blood loss and knowing when it had passed into danger, a mother could bleed to death in the hours after a successful birth. Infection, an unclean environment, a cord tied with contaminated material, hands that hadn't been prepared. These were all vectors for infection that could kill a newborn within days. Mary and her son were at risk for all of these things. The conditions in that stable, the animals, the improvised cleanliness, the absence of experienced hands, made every one of them more likely. None of them happened. The theology of the Incarnation says that God took on full human flesh. He did not become invulnerable to the biology of being born. He was born into risk, into the specific medical vulnerabilities of a first-century newborn in a compromised delivery environment. He survived those risks. She survived those risks. Both of them, in a stable in Bethlehem, with no midwife and a teenage mother who had never done this before. The wonder is not just that God became flesh. The wonder is that the flesh he became was born in these conditions and came through them after the birth, after the cleaning, after the swaddling, after she had laid him in the manger. What does a woman do in those minutes? She shakes. The adrenaline that carried her through labor drops sharply in the hour after delivery. The body trembles. Not from cold, from chemistry. It is involuntary. It is the physical cost of what was just demanded. She bled. Normal postpartum bleeding, which every woman who has delivered knows. In an animal shelter, with limited cloth and no experienced attendant checking whether the bleeding was slowing as it should, this was something she had to monitor herself. She was thirsty. Profoundly thirsty. Labor dehydrates the body the same way intense physical exertion does. She had been working harder than she had ever worked in her life for hours. She needed water. Joseph brought it. Joseph did what he could do: be present, bring water, manage the practical immediate needs of a woman who had just delivered and a newborn who had just arrived. And she held the baby. Luke 2:19. But Mary treasured all these things, pondering them in her heart. She had just done the hardest thing a human body can do, alone, in the worst possible conditions, at 15 years old. And her response was not collapse, not relief, not demands for recognition. She pondered. She held the child, and she held the mystery, and she sat in the silence of the stable, and she kept going, internally, the way she had always kept going, by treasuring what she couldn't explain and trusting the one who could. There is something the absence of a midwife revealed that the presence of one would have obscured. Mary did it herself, not alone in the theological sense. She had Joseph, she had God. She had the preparation of 9 months of carrying and learning and preparing. But in the practical, physical, biological sense, she delivered her son with her own hands and her own body and the limited resources of an animal shelter in a strange city. And she came through. Every future moment of her life carried this one. Every time the church would later call her theotokos, God-bearer. The title was earned not just by the theological reality of who she carried, but by the physical reality of how she bore him, in conditions that should have overwhelmed her, in circumstances that would have broken someone less prepared by the previous 9 months. She bore him completely, all the way to the end. The same woman who had said yes to Gabriel without knowing what yes would cost. The same woman who had walked 90 miles because there was no other option. The same woman who had arrived in a stable and made it work. She delivered the Son of God in a place that had no business hosting a delivery. And in doing so, she became the first person in human history to see his face. After everything that night had cost her, she got to be that. The first face he saw, the first voice he recognized, the first hands that held him. The cost and the gift were the same moment. Step back now. No midwife, no doctor, no experienced woman. A stone floor covered in hay, a cord tied with whatever was available, a baby cleaned and swaddled by hands that had never done it before. A mother who shook with adrenaline and held him anyway. A stable that should have been wrong for all of this and somehow held it. She did it. Not because she was superhuman, not because the theology made the biology easy, but because she had been saying yes every day for 9 months and one more yes. The hardest one, the physical one, the one in a stable in the dark, was still a yes she had in her. Here is the quiet truth. If you have ever had to do the hardest thing in the worst conditions with the least support, if you have ever come through something that shouldn't have been survivable and found yourself on the other side of it, shaking, holding what you fought for, if you have ever done it alone when alone was the only option, you were in that stable with Mary. She had no midwife, she had no doctor, She had no experienced help. She had a yes that was bigger than the conditions. And it was enough. If this changed how you see that night, share it with a mother who needs to hear it tonight. Subscribe if you want to keep walking through the stories no one tells you. Drop in the comments. What hit you hardest? The midwife she didn't have? The swaddling cloth she packed for 90 miles? The pondering after? I read every one. See you in the next one.